It's January 9th, 2020, episode 2. Welcome. I'm so glad you came. Hopefully you've listened to the introduction. If not, I would highly recommend you starting there first. But it come to my attention. Man, I'm going to make fun of myself sometimes too. This is some very serious subject matter. So while we're doing it, let's have a little fun too. And when I start goofing around, keep in mind I'm not making fun of you. I'm really making fun of the naysayers and the non-believers. Because if you've been a Christian any length of time at all, I'm certain you've encountered them too. And Christ called them hypocrites often. And that's a pretty good term for them. I know we're always called the hypocrites, aren't we? Christians are always called hypocrites. That's okay. I always remember Christ said they hated me first. Just remember that. So let's remember that. But I promised you clarity. Told you that was my goal. And what did I do? Right off the bat, silly me, never quite got around to clearly explaining why you need a Strong's Concordance. So let's take care of that one first. Couple of good reasons, if you can swing it, get you an unedited Strong's Concordance. They're not that expensive. And here's why. I'll give you an example. The word requite. It's not a real common English word, but it's in the authorized version of the King James. And it says surely, speaking of God, Isaiah the prophet said, surely he will requite. You hit that. And you could look up, if you don't know the meaning of the English word requite, you could look it up. But it's a lot better if you have a Strong's Concordance. So you can break that. It's in the Old Testament. It's a Hebrew word that that requite was translated from. You have the ability now to go and look and see exact definition of what that word means in Hebrew, which I honestly feel to really, if you're serious about studying, you really do need to break. I'm not saying you're going to have time or be able to take every single word in the Bible and break it back. But when you hit words like that, I'll give you another one, evil. There's several different Hebrew words that the King James translators rendered evil. But they're specifically different words with different meanings in the Hebrew. Or, in some cases, Greek. They're different words. One frequently used word translated evil actually means calamity. Where God said, I create the good and I create the evil, he didn't actually say he creates evil. He said he creates calamity. And there's lots of examples of that, including the Babylonian captivity, the Assyrian captivity. That was quite a calamity the Egyptians encountered when they got their chariots and themselves got covered in water at the Red Sea. That was calamity, wasn't it? God said, I do all these things. And I'll put it on the website, but I'm sorry, it escapes me at the moment exactly where that one's at. I think it's, I'm not going to say, because I don't want to tell you wrong. I would rather omit it for this moment in time than to tell you wrong. But I do all these things. In Isaiah, he says basically the exact same thing, and he goes, yet men do not lay it to heart. Often he doesn't get credit for the things that he does. And yes, in this dispensation of time, there is a boy, I don't want to use the word evil, but okay, I guess we will. There are a darker side of the plan. Or a negative side of the plan. Maybe that's the word I'm searching for. Okay? Including the appearance of Antichrist, which is yet future to now, to today. We'll be getting into that later, but man, is that an important one? Because when you start understanding the appearance of Antichrist, you start understanding Matthew 24 among many, many, many other places. Let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about. Later on in Matthew 24, it's got when he returns, the seventh trump. Here he's returned. Sorry, the trump I'm borrowing from Revelation, but he's going through each of the trumps. All 7 trumps are covered in Matthew 24. When he gets to that last 6th one, Antichrist appears, but at that last one he appears and it says, and the tribes of the earth mourn. Has your preacher ever explained to you why they mourn? Before that, a little bit before that, earlier, that's out toward the end of 24. A little earlier, he explains about, I'm going to come like a thief in the night. I'm going to catch a bunch of you off guard. It could kind of make you uncomfortable if you don't understand where he's going with this. Well, why would they get caught off guard? I'm going to give you the short answer, and you're going to have to stick with me on these podcasts to get to more in-depth thing. But remember, in 2 Thessalonians, we're told that those that won't receive the love of the truth will be damned to believe a lie. The lie is how it actually says. What's the lie? What's that big lie you're going to be damned to believe? I'm sorry. It's early in the going, and I hate if you've got a little safety blanket there with you, and you think you're not going to be here during the appearance of Antichrist in the tribulation, that you're somehow going to be gone. Dear brothers and sisters, you've been lied to, or brother or sister, you've been lied to. You've been told the lie. Okay, you are going to be here. Okay, and you're going to be one of those ones caught off guard. Why? Well, because you thought he was already here. You thought, if you think he's already here, that's the hour you're least expecting him to return, right? That's why the tribes of the earth mourn when he returns. We'll get into more of that later. I hesitate to say I'm sorry I dropped that on you, because some of you probably needed to hear that. And if you run away and stop listening, well, boy, I'd sure hate for you to be damned to believe a lie. The lie. Boy, I'd really hate that. So stick around, okay? Stick around. So now, I said that we was going to have a little fun, talk about a serious subject. Man, that got pretty serious pretty quick, didn't it? So let's lighten it up a little bit. We'll have a little fun. Should we even be trying to figure out how late it is on the clock, on the doomsday clock, if you will? And by the way, when we talk about doomsday, Armageddon, the end, all that, it's just the end of evil. It's the end of all that opposes us Christians. It's the establishment of the kingdom with Christ, the good and righteous King, right here on earth. He's going to dwell with us. What a wonderful time. Why would we be sad about that? It's only the end for the wicked. Okay? Satan gets cast in prison for the 1,000 years, the day of the Lord. He has no influence on us whatsoever. It's going to be a time, it's going to be a wonderful time. It's not the end of everything. So, all these imagery of devastating nuclear war and everybody's dead and that's the end of it all. Rejoice, brothers and sisters. It's not the end of it all. It's a new beginning. It's a new beginning. Jesus will be here with us, and he's not going away, or he's not going to be crucified this time. That's already completed. And he's not only going to be here a few short years and then us have to be without him again. That's never going to happen again. He's coming for good. So why would we want to go somewhere else? Someone want to explain that one to me? Why would we want to go somewhere else? Christ is returning here. Rejoice. So now, here we go, the fun I promised. But Pat, doesn't the Bible say No man knows the day or the hour. And furthermore, doesn't it say that there would be no sign? Okay. Boy, that right there. And I've had people say something very similar to that. Maybe not in quite as goofy a voice as I just did it. That's what I hear when they say it to me. That's exactly the way it sounds to me. But here goes. This demonstrates clearly why you cannot cherry pick verses. You'll wind up believing foolish doctrines, unprofitable doctrines. Doctrines of devils were warned about in the New Testament. Yes, doctrines of devils. Like the rapture doctrine. That's not biblical. In fact, the whole Bible warns against that. That's not the way it's going to happen. But when you start cherry picking verses and taking verses out of context, you wind up in deep doo-doo, to put it nicely. No man knows. Correct. That's in Matthew chapter 24. But don't just read that one verse. Read the whole chapter. In fact, this explains why I almost always just give you the chapter. When I'm talking about something, I'll just give you the chapter, the book and the chapter it's in. I rarely narrow it down to a verse. Because why? I want you to read the whole thing. I want you to have context. Context is extremely important, and when you remove it, you'll wind up believing lies. You'll wind up getting a misimpression. You'll wind up basically with a bunch of preconceived ideas that are false. And then pretty soon you're going to read something else that contradicts your preconceived idea, and you're going to think the Bible contradicts itself. You're going to think it's wrong. Something's wrong here. Yeah, you're correct about that. There is something wrong. It's in your own brain, or my own brain. I've done it a million times. I'm not speaking down to anybody here. It took the school of hard knocks to teach this to me. Don't cherry pick verses. It leads to babble. Pretty soon, the multitude of conflicting voices is doing the same mistake you just did. Take cherry picking verses, and you'll wind up confused. Okay, there's the warning of the day. I tried to lighten it up a little bit with the goofiness, but I know it's still very serious. So, be careful. That Matthew 24 is fascinating. Parallel chapters to that are Luke 21 and Mark 13. There's a lot of, I'm not going to call it redundancy, because one book will have a little bit of detail, the other one didn't, or one, chapter with it. Read them all. But you will see that it is definitely talking about the same thing. You have the delivering up. You have Christians being killed, which it's hard to argue that hasn't been the case. A lot of murders especially in this last generation, the generation of the fig tree, which is also mentioned Mark 13, Matthew 24, Luke 21. All three places you're told Christ, the Master himself, tells you to learn the parable of the fig tree. Let's make that our next podcast. It's so important in understanding the end times and where you're at on the big clock that we're all looking forward to the return of Christ. So he will reign righteously, and there's no more wickedness. There's no more babble. There's no more confusion. Nobody's going to ask his brother, know the Lord? That's written too, by the way. Nobody's going to ask that anymore. He's right here with us, and that's going to be a great time. So there you go. No man knows. Oh, what about the one? Oh, well, there's not going to be a sign. All right. Keep in mind. Luke chapter 12, Matthew chapter 16 records this. Read them both. Read both chapters, please. I beg you. You'll see he's talking to guys he calls hypocrites, because they can look up in the sky and they can discern what the weather's going to do. They can forecast the weather, but they can't discern the signs of the times. So he tells them the only sign you're going to get's the sign of Jonah, which he's talking about his crucifixion and resurrection after the 3.5 days. Okay, that's what he's talking about. That's the only sign you're going to get. And they couldn't deny, well, they could try, but there was no denying that one. He returned in the spiritual body. And, wow. Okay, that was their sign. But there's plenty of signs. There's plenty of end-time signs. We'll go through it. I remember I talked in the introduction about a preponderance of evidence. Bit by bit, I'm going to build the case that we are indeed in the last days. We are indeed supposed to watch. Christ said that repeatedly throughout the 4 Gospels. I tell you, watch. He wasn't kidding. Watch. Study. Study to show yourself approved. Okay? That's what we're doing here. And, nope, I don't know the day or the hour. Don't claim to. God knows. I don't. Angels don't even know the day or the hour. But we know the season. We know the generation, don't we? We know we're going to dive deep into the generation of the fig tree, in which Christ tells us. Remember, the 3 books the 3 chapters I already told you. Mark 24, Luke 21, Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. Okay? Learn the parable of the fig tree. And it goes on to say, all these things, this generation shall not pass until all these things be fulfilled. Also in those chapters, we're told, when you see all these things, know that it is nigh, or even at the door. Does that sound like somebody that doesn't want us to know? No. He expects the people that love him to know what generation they're living in, what season they're living in, and be watching, be paying attention. Be looking for him to return. Be praying for him to return. We're supposed to do all those things. Now, I will give further, and even right down to the exact verses of all these things I'm talking about on the website. It's in development. It's not available for you to see yet, but will be soon. Keep in mind, this is January 9th. You may not encounter this podcast for a year. Who knows? 2 years. Whatever. But as of this recording, this moment in time right now, website's in development. It's not available yet, but I'll tell you where it's going to be. Bible.welcomehome777.com. That's Bible.welcomehome777.com. Anyone who wants to follow this journey, who wants to learn to discern the signs of the time so that we're not hypocrites, who wants to be the good and faithful servant working in the vineyard when the master returns, instead of the evil servant that says in his heart, the Lord delayeth in his coming. We're not going to say that, Matthew 24, by the way. We're not saying that. We're going to work in the vineyard, which is this world, of course. So, there we have it. One more thing I want to talk about, taking Scripture. We covered pretty good about the dangers of taking verses out of context. Keep in mind, Matthew chapter 4, what did Satan, the adversary himself, tempt him with? Well, he tempted him with great wealth, didn't he? All the cities, look at these great cities. I'll give them to you if you worship me. No. What else? Scripture. He quoted Scripture. He cherry-picked verses. Christ he didn't take the bait, let's say. He rebuked him properly. If you don't read anything else today, please read Matthew chapter 4. It's worth it. All right, that's it for episode 2. I really thank you for your time. It means a lot to me that you took the time to listen to this. So, students of the last days, thank you. I love you. Bye.